Stacey Washington.
Welcome to the program. Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. It's my pleasure to be with you and also to welcome you to the program. Happy Monday. We have a ton to get to today. We have so much news and information. Things are just moving really fast, really quickly, I should say. And it's good. Some of it's good. Some of it's so-so. And I think some of it's bad. So we're going to first... I want to tell you we have Eric Trump. He is actually running the Trump companies while his father is the president of the United States. And so we're so excited to speak to him again. He's been on the program once before. He's going to come on and talk to us about this wonderful new NAFTA deal. He'll be on in the last segment of this hour. And then we're going to continue to unpack this whole Kavanaugh thing. But before we get to that, I want to give you some, it's a daily confession. So if you're going to church regularly, you've probably heard your pastor talking about how we should confess the word over situations that are tough, confess the word over difficult situations, really plug into the word because that's our power source. That connects us. God's word is, that's his instruction manual for us, and it helps us to, first of all, renew our minds and to continue that march in it. We're being sanctified, but it's an effort. It's not something that happens passively. You have to go into the word. And so I was thinking about some of the scriptures that I confess on a daily basis. And I thought, I feel an inordinate sense of stress over what's going on with the Supreme Court nomination. And for some people, well, why? Why would you be? Well, the reason why is because it's not just the Supreme Court nomination that is impacted here. What we're seeing, a huge amount of Americans that are saying, men shut up. Women have the right to not only be heard, but to be believed in every instance. Men are taking a backseat to women in a way that it's not equal under the law. It's not equal in the sight of God. And it's not something that if you're a woman, we had a caller last week who pointed out, well, you're a woman. Yeah, a circumstance of my birth, but definitely not something that would cause me to think differently. But there are millions of Americans right now, women specifically, but some men as well, who are really taking on this victimhood cloak, this mantle of, it's just what I can see. The circumstances that are around me are all that really matter. And that is not biblical. So what I want to do today is, it's our first time doing it at the top of the show where we just have our daily confession. Today's comes from Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. Now, let's unpack that for a second. Why would God remind us that he's the mighty warrior who saves? Specifically for circumstances like this. We're watching the high-tech lynching of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. And for many, I've seen many people of huge stature, big-time writers for conservative publications, and all are sounding the clarion call that this is a moment where we have to choose a path. If we choose the path of victimization and victimhood, then we end up traveling along a trajectory that means that we really need to decouple ourselves from our very basic assumptions about every single person in this country, which is that you're innocent until proven guilty, and the standard is preponderance of evidence. And so the Bible says the Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. So who will save Brett Kavanaugh from this? It's not just an unfortunate condition. It's an intentional maligning of his character and the destruction of him as a person. Who will save him from that? Well, our Father in heaven. Now, that doesn't mean we're passive in that and we just sit back and watch, confess our scripture and move on. No, we have to actively shut down the idea that a person can simply accuse another person, and by virtue of that person who's accusing be a woman, then the person who's being accused is automatically guilty. When you hear that, put up the stop sign. Sorry, no, I can't accept that. That's not something I'm willing to accept. I believe in innocent until proven guilty. And later in the show today, we're going to have a little bit of audio from the Megyn Kelly show, where she has this young man on. He just happens to be black. His accuser was also black, so it's not a racial story. And he was convicted on simply her word alone and prosecutorial misconduct, and he didn't have very good legal representation himself, of raping her. Well, sexual assault. They didn't get specific about what exactly what he was accused of, but he went to jail for 5 years under a plea agreement. And then after he got out of jail and was still wearing an ankle monitor, she reached out to him on Facebook to try to paper things over because she'd gotten a settlement from the school where it supposedly occurred for $1.5 million. So this young man has had to be wrongly incarcerated, and he had a football scholarship that he was going to go to college on. He was a football star in high school. He had that completely obliterated by this woman, who then went on to try to be his friend. She wanted to kindle a relationship, she said, to put bygones behind us. And it was through that interaction that he was able to get the Innocence Project to help him exonerate himself, because she admitted that she lied. And so what I want to encourage you, first of all, we want less of that. We want less young men going to prison because they've been wrongly accused. We also want fewer young women who've been sexually assaulted to go forward without ever having justice given to them. But those two situations are not the Kavanaugh situation. And so as we roll through this week, the temptation is to become downtrodden with it, to see that because the Democrats control the media and they control the online written space, that there just isn't any way for us to prevail. There's no way for Kavanaugh to prevail. You see the cartoon that was written about him where his daughter is praying for him and she's calling him a rapist and everything else. You see that, and it's very discouraging. And that's what's in the natural. What we have to pay attention to, if we are to be effective, is we have to pay attention to what God's word says, because he takes care of situations. God doesn't have to be working where we can see it for him to be working. So the Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. So he's going to save us out of every situation. He will make all things right. He will take great delight in you. That's each and every one of us. In his love, he will no longer rebuke us because we can ask for forgiveness, and he will rejoice over us with singing, which is something fantastic. And if you have children, you know how it is when you're just so pleased with your baby and you're just walking around carrying your baby around singing. That is the relationship that we have with our Father in heaven. And it is so important for us to hold on to that when we're in these rocky times. And these are rocky times because if Kavanaugh goes down, this same tactic will be employed for every single judicial nominee going forward. This almost worked on Clarence Thomas, but it still worked in the election that same year. The year that Dianne Feinstein created this whole methodology of attack, it didn't work with Judge Clarence Thomas. He was seated, but it did help usher in a whole lot of women elected to Congress on the Democratic side based upon the fact that they said he got onto the Supreme Court incorrectly, wrongly. That's not what we want to see here. We want to see people go on to the Supreme Court and into judicial appointments and into any sphere of American life based on their qualifications. Not like in California where they're now saying it's the law, you have to have a woman on your board of directors. So if you're running a nuts and bolts factory and everybody on your board is related to you or used to work in the company actually making nuts and bolts, and you don't have any women who are interested in serving on the board, you don't even have very many women in your workforce, you have to go out and find some woman and probably pay her to serve on a board that's unpaid so that you can satisfy this law in California. And I really ask you, if you're a woman, I certainly find that insulting. I would want to be placed on a board. As I have served on boards before, they reach out to me and ask me, your skills and expertise look like they fit our board. Can we have an interview? Can we talk to you? We'd love for you to serve us. We'd love to have your input on our operations. That is something that is a privilege to receive that email or phone call. It's a privilege to do that service. Sometimes those positions are paid. I've never been paid to be on a board, but there are paid board positions. But that's the point, is that you want to be asked, or you want to seek out the opportunity and say, I think I have something to offer. Have them consider you and choose you based on your merit, not some arbitrary law put in place by a victim capologist. That's not what we want. So again, it's Zephaniah 3:17. That's our daily confession. You can switch those words up and say them about yourself. The Lord my God is with me. He is a mighty warrior who saves. He takes great delight in me, in his love, He will no longer rebuke me, but he will rejoice over me with singing. It'll lift your spirits. It'll lift your heart. Put on some praise and worship. Get it. You will enjoy it. And that is a way for us to keep ourselves. We need to be at an even keel to deal with the kinds of things we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. right now. It's like somebody let a bunch of mentally ill, no offense, tweens, but mentally ill tweens to run around in Washington, D.C., and they're just doing whatever they want, regardless of what the law says or what the rules say or what decorum says. You got these protesters who were paid by Soros who confronted Jeff Flake in that elevator and screamed in his face and ordered him to turn around and listen to them. You can't walk away from me. In what country are we living where a person who's being verbally assaulted can't simply turn and walk away? I would have said, actually, I can. And I am. I'm walking away. And now, Capitol Police, will you please escort these two people off this elevator? They wouldn't have had 5 seconds with me. But I guess as a man, Jeff Flake doesn't feel he has that right. That's what we have to avoid. So actually, we have some breaking news on the president this morning and a press conference about his new announcement that he actually got Canada to come to the table without crooking his pinky on the North American Free Trade Agreement, which now has a new name. He verbally expanded the FBI investigation when answering a question from a reporter. It's number 6.
I think the FBI should interview anybody that they want within reason. But you have to say within reason. They should interview, but they should also be guided, and I'm being guided, by what the senators are looking for.
Should Brett Kavanaugh be interviewed by the FBI?
I think so. I think it's fine if they do.
Should the FBI interview all 3 of Brett Kavanaugh's accusers?
It wouldn't bother me at all. Now, it depends. I don't know all 3 of the accusers.
All 3.
Certainly, I imagine they're going to interview 2. The third one I don't know much about, but it wouldn't bother me at all. I mean, I've been heard that the third one has, I have no idea if this is true, has very little credibility.
So the very little credibility, we'll discuss that. We'll talk about the very little credibility. It's one of those things where so it's important for us to basically vet the accuser. And what the left wants us to do is to say, well, if it's a woman, she has to be believed. Well, what about the women who accused Bill Clinton? What about the girl who was killed by Ted Kennedy? What about the woman who is currently accusing Keith Ellison? What about all of the accusations that were leveled against Harvey Weinstein? He was allowed to be a predator all over the United States and internationally by people who, when a woman would say something about it, they'd say, oh, you got to be quiet because you don't want to go up against him. So it's only now that women need to be believed, now that they found some women to accuse Brett Kavanaugh. Do you see the double standard? And if you're fuming right now, if you're in a rage because I'm saying this, and you want to call me a liberal snowflake or some other really, just it doesn't match up kind of insult, why don't you address the beam in your own eye, first of all? Because this isn't about me personally. This is about the actual rule of law. And it's about, I find it hard to believe that women in America today live in complete cultures that they don't have a father, they don't have a brother, they don't have a son, they're not married to a man, there's no man in your life anywhere, you don't have a male boss or male coworker, there's not a man in your life anywhere, the guy who guards the front door at your apartment complex or wherever you're interacting, you've never come across a man who, if you thought he was being wrongly accused, you would stand up for him and really advocate on his behalf, because it's not about him, it's about justice. It's about what's right and what's wrong. And so if all you can hear is the fact that I'm a woman and I'm not against Brett Kavanaugh, you're missing the bigger picture here. It's about wrongly accused individuals not having their basic constitutionally provided rights afforded to them because of some hashtag movement. A bunch of people who probably have good intentions, some of them, but they're being used. They're political pawns. That's the real problem. It's not that I'm a woman or that I have the wrong view. All right, when we get back, we have more for you. We're going to be talking about this NAFTA trade agreement, or the new one. Stay there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, the very first day in Israel, when we're staying in Jerusalem, we go to the Mount of Olives. And it's there at the Mount of Olives. We look out over the old city of Jerusalem. It's a spectacular sight. You've seen it in pictures before, but it's another thing to actually be there as we walk down from the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we pray there. It's going to be a wonderful time with brothers and sisters from around the country visiting the Holy Land, the land of Jesus. If you want information on this March 14th through the 22nd tour, just call us and we'll send you a brochure. Call 1-800-FAMILIES, F-A-M-I-L-I-E-S, option 5, and leave us your name and your address, and we'll mail you a brochure. Or if you want to simply go online at twholyland.com, everything's there. twholyland.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Years ago, I sat in a meeting in which a man who heads up a fairly large Christian organization literally made light of and ridiculed another fellow in the meeting who was leading this other ministry that was much smaller and yet was doing very much the same thing. I couldn't believe my ears. We're the big boys on the block, and we're far more significant, and everybody knows our track record and our history. I sat there grieved. And by the way, I did speak up. It hurts to be told that what you're doing doesn't matter and it's insignificant. In Nehemiah chapter 4, Nehemiah is rebuilding the wall. Not everybody likes what Nehemiah is doing. In fact, what he is doing is threatening them. So they resort to ridicule, putting him down. Beginning in verse 1, Now it came about that when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious and very angry and mocked the Jews. He spoke in the presence of his brothers and the wealthy men of Samaria and said, What are these feeble Jews doing? Are they going to restore it for themselves? Can they offer sacrifices? Can they finish in a day? Can they revive the stone from the dusty rubble, even the burnt ones? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was near him, and he said, Even what they are building, if a fox should jump on it, he would break their stone wall down. Now Nehemiah responds in verse 4, Hear, O our God, how we are despised. Then verse 6, So we built the wall, and the whole wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. If God told you to do something, then it's significant. Only what God says really matters.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I also want to thank President Peña Nieto of Mexico, who we had a few disagreements, but I really like him a lot. I think he may like me, I'm not sure. But I think he's a terrific person, and he'll be leaving soon, but he's really done a good job and wonderful, wonderful person. And the Mexican President-elect López Obrador, who has given his support to this agreement, and we're developing a really good relationship, which I think is very important for our country, frankly, and for Mexico. And so they worked together on this. This was done by both. I said, look, I don't want to sign an agreement, and then a new president comes in. They don't like it, and we have difficulty. They worked very much together on it, and I appreciate it from both.
Wow, so that's President Trump, who had a pretty interesting freewheeling press conference this morning. He was touching on a lot of subjects. He hit the trade topic, and I think it's a real victory for him. And it's in an area where it was roundly reported everywhere you look that he couldn't get this done, that he couldn't renegotiate this trade agreement. And really, he's renamed it to kind of honor that. And it's always a good reset to rename something that's been radically changed or updated and improved, as is the case here. He was told you can't renegotiate NAFTA. NAFTA is the deal of the day, and you have to keep it. You can't change it. The other countries won't put up with it. And what he proved is what I honestly, didn't I say this like a year and a half ago? I've said this at least 4 or 5 times on the show. It's a regular refrain that the deal is doing business with America. So we have all of the cards. We should set the table. We should decide the menu. We should choose the servers. We should decide what time the meal is going to be served, who gets to come, and when it's over. And we should also not be the only people who are paying, but we should get to share in the payments. In other words, it's an equal type of a deal. And if we want to be the ones who are footing more of the bill for a while, as we have done for decades, and then we want to change our minds about that, that should also be something that we do with impunity, because the deal is getting to deal with America. I love the fact that Donald Trump knew that from decades ago. He's been talking about this for decades. And now he's showing that there's a lot of value in saying, I don't like this deal and I want to negotiate another one. And then when Canada said, well, we don't want to do that, he said, okay, I'll negotiate something with Mexico then. And he got down to the table with Mexico and negotiated something that worked. And really, it has nothing to do with anything other than business. So he negotiated the deal with the country that would sit down, and then he put a deadline on the table, which a lot of Americans don't know about because the mainstream media didn't even report that hey, if you don't come to us by this day, we're going to have to go ahead and go forward without you. And, Canada will not be a part of this deal. Well, that's what he said. And what has happened? Canada had to come to the table. There were others in the Canadian government who went to Justin Trudeau last week and said, the deadline is approaching. You need to reinsert yourself into this negotiation and get Canada back at the table with the United States. It's just unacceptable that they would have a trade deal with Mexico and not with us. And we want it to be bilateral. We want it to be the three of us together as the North America. In other words, just the continent together. We want that. That's something that we've had. It's something that we want in the future. Get back in there. And so Justin Trudeau had to cave to the pressure put on him, and so he did. So now I want to listen to number 4. It's Treasury Secretary Mnuchin talking about this new trade deal with Canada. Now, this was on Friday. I had a little bit of audio from him this morning, but we were unable to kind of make the little gremlins in the background click on that one. But this is still good because he's talking about the Canadian aspect of this trade deal. It's number 4.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on any one issue. What I would say is the U.S. market and the Canadian markets are very intertwined. It's important for them to get this deal, and it's important for us to get this deal. So I think we'll be successful. But again, if we don't, we'll move forward with Mexico, and then we'll reach a separate agreement with Canada. So this is really about a trade win. This is about the president's economic agenda that we've been very clear from day one: tax reform, regulatory relief, and trade. And this is the first major component of the trade agreements.
And it's the first major component. So there'll be other tweaks and changes. The other thing that's not being widely reported is that guess who else is coming to the table? Guess who else is reducing their tariffs on American goods? Guess who else is opening up other trade avenues to American goods and services? China. Remember, we were told that Mr. Protectionist Donald Trump was going to destroy the American economy by renegotiating anything, not just with the North American Free Trade Agreement, but with China specifically. We were told that jobs could not return to this country. We were told so many things. It had to have been, I kind of tuned some of it out because I was considering the source, people who believed in the kind of economics that we saw from the previous president. And, if that had worked, then I would have been a convert to it, because for me, it's not about, I can only believe in this one thing, even if it doesn't work. No, it has to be that in the face of new information and proof that a new way is better, that you have to be able to absorb that new information. Here's the problem. We haven't gotten any new information that shows that kowtowing to our trade partners and giving them deals that benefit them and not us somehow helps Americans. We have huge segments of our society, and I think they're larger than they should be, considering the kind of economic growth and prosperity we have in this country and the opportunity that's here. We have outsized individual groups of people who are not experiencing the American dream. They're living in extreme poverty, or poverty that it's poverty American style. Obviously, in comparison to some other countries, it would still be, primo living. But for American standards, it's not up to snuff. And the way to get to those segments of our society is obviously we seal the southern border, we get rid of the illegal immigration and the depression of wages that comes with that. But also, to make sure that enough of our manufacturing is still situated in the contiguous United States, making it possible for us to not only stand up the means and methodology to make war if we should need to, but to employ segments of our society that benefit most from those jobs. So am I saying that we can't become a completely technologically advanced society? We're already there. We're already at a place where now scientists are discussing whether or not all of us should be able to have, I don't have any cat pictures, but for those of you who like cats, cat pics, for me it's pics of kids and dogs, up in the cloud. Whether or not we should have the ability to upload just any old thing we want, all the old memes from 2012, all that stuff, instead of limiting what people can upload because the scientists and researchers need cloud space to store data, you know, research and things like that. And so that's already a conversation that's happening. And that's like, 30,000 feet above the level where we're all just uploading every picture or, 20 selfies in one outfit, 80 pictures of your rose garden, that type of stuff. That's the discussion that's being had. So you reach a place technologically where there's only so far you can go. And of course you can still advance, but it's not the leaps and bounds like we're experiencing right now. And so that has to be a part of the equation as well. But we're never going to have 100% of our society like you see in space movies, like in Star Trek and Star Wars. You see that the entire culture has been completely technologically advanced to the point where there's that doesn't happen. Remember, there's the 80-10-10 principle with human beings, which is you got 80% of the people who are willing to consider almost any proposal. You have 10% who are always going to be a no. They're a no. They are a no. They are absolutely a no. And then you have 10% of the people who are, quite honestly, they're a yes. They are just riding by the seat of their pants and they're screaming all the way down and they're laughing and giggling and they're high on life or whatever. And they're just, yes, you want to do something new? Yes. So that means you'll never have 100% of our society. I mean, we can't even get 100% of Americans to buy car insurance. Did you know that? Actuarially speaking, only 80%, sometimes as high as like 88% of Americans at any one time, everybody has car insurance. That's because some people just aren't going to buy it. They're not financially stable enough. They're going to drive a car, but they're just not going to buy any car insurance. We have car insurance rates that account for that reality. So there's never an opportunity for us to get 100% of human beings to do anything except, natural bodily functions and waking up and going to sleep and that type of stuff, paying taxes and dying. And we can't even get 100% on that. So what's important for us is that we understand that and we take the successes where we can get them. And this trade deal is 100% of a success for us. So I want to talk about the dairy issue. So you've got the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is that's not what it's being called anymore. And when I say it's a total uptick, meaning we have this completely revamped structure, it's the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada deal. I want to give you the specific name because he called it the MCA earlier today at the press conference. It's the 3 NAFTA signatory countries coming together, and it's a new accord, and it's called the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. So still a nice, simple name. And it was struck just ahead of the deadline on Sunday night. And it governs nearly $1.2 trillion in trade, making it the biggest trade deal in the history of the United States. It's truly historic, and it's something that I'm excited about because I like to see us win. I would have loved to have seen an agreement that reoriented the structure of our business arrangement with Canada and Mexico under President Obama, because it would have saved millions of American jobs and it would have meant more economic prosperity. But he wasn't willing to do it. I'm happy to see it under Donald Trump because he actually ran on that. Promises made, promises kept. That's fantastic. So you might have seen the story. I want to pivot over really quickly. And also, we have time in this segment to take calls because we will not have time to take calls during the interview with Mr. Trump. So what I'd like you to do is, if you want to call in, it's 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. You can call in and talk about free trade agreement, Kavanaugh, or this story, D.C. restaurant hiring guards after an anti-Kavanaugh crowd harassed Ted Cruz and his wife. So you might have saw this story last week. You got Ted Cruz, and he's coming to a restaurant with his wife, and they're in D.C. Now, remember, the spouses of these political figures aren't really in the game. Yes, they support their spouses, but really? Like, since when has your boss ever called you up and asked to speak to your husband and yell at him about something you did? Doesn't usually happen, does it? So you've got an upscale Italian restaurant called Fiola, and they're hiring security guards after protesters confronted Senator Ted Cruz and his wife while dining at the restaurant last week. He says, we're now living in the aftermath of this PR disaster. He emailed the customers. He said last Monday, Cruz and his wife were chased out by about a dozen protesters regarding the senator's support of embattled Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh. He said, we never would have thought such a thing was possible in the restaurant business. The email said Trabocchi and his wife, Maria Font Trabocchi, have personally received death threats just because the Cruzes came to eat there. Can you imagine? So you're running an upscale restaurant and a senator and his wife show up. You seat them, and then people want to kill you because you offer them a place to eat. It's a restaurant. You're in public. Unless they showed up drunk or improperly dressed, what were they supposed to do? In addition to extra security, staff are being retrained to avoid similar instances and encouraged customers to keep coming to Fiola's because, quote, we will emerge from this challenge quickly. Video clips of the confrontation were posted to Twitter by an account called Smash Racism DC, and she tweeted out and said it was an honor to welcome them back. And they came back on Monday evening after the protesters left. They came back and had their meal. Way to go for them. And they said after a brief interruption by protesters and after police arrived, Mr. and Mrs. Cruz were able to finish their meal. Fantastic. I'm really happy about that. Okay, so let's go to the phones. We have Ron in Texas. Thank you for calling in to Stacey on the Right. Happy Monday to you.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you having me on.
Sure.
What I'd like to make is a comment on Ms. Ford's qualifications for being the perfect accuser because she knows, because of her schooling and background, she knows exactly what traits to exhibit while she's sitting there. She knows what characteristics to explain because she is a perfect person for that because of her degrees in psychology and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. Having been a behavioral detection officer with PSA, you learn to look at all the small things, and you know she's right on the. She knows what to exhibit, and I think she's lying through her teeth also.
Yes, thank you. I did too. I did not find her credible. I'm not one of those people who believes something happened to her. I think she made it up, and she was well rehearsed. Because she acted as if she didn't know stuff about psychology, but some of her advanced education is in psychology. Thank you so much. Okay, Vicki in Ohio, thank you so much for calling the show. We have a little less than a minute. What's your comment?
Hi, I just wanted to comment on the tactics that are being used by people, the very liberal right. If you think about it, historically, when people don't realize history, they are doomed to repeat it because these are the exact same tactics that were used by the brown shirts in Germany when Hitler was first coming on the scene. And when people don't really get that we are rapidly moving to where societal, just our norms and values are just being so, I don't know, just eroded away so rapidly that nothing is off bounds. How is it a crime to be in a restaurant with your wife eating and people feel like they can literally come and run you out?
I have no idea.
Sad.
It's sad. It is. And we have to stand up against it. And if it takes armed guards, so be it. But the protesters are the ones who weren't allowed to be there because it's private property. Thank you so much, Vicki in Ohio. We're going to go to the break now. And what we're going to do is when we come back, I believe we're going to have Eric Trump. So you guys, I'm so excited to get to speak to him again. Stay right there.
Physical activity is the new trend. It's not a bad thing unless it has brought a sense of vanity in your life. 2 years ago, I was not happy with the number on the scale, nor how I looked. I've never been a huge person, but I was, as the old folks would say, healthy. I joined a gym, gained a personal trainer, even changed some of my eating habits. The Lord checked me one day and in my spirit said, "Why are you disgusted with yourself? Be healthy, take care of the temple I've loaned you, but do it because you want to honor this body, which is your responsibility while on this earth." I said, "You better let me know, Abba." Psalms 139 verse 14 says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." 15 pounds down, I know that even if I was to never look like Serena Williams with those nice framed, worked out arms, I am wonderfully made in his image, and so are you. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've seen God open up so many doors for us to help serve and love those who get affected by a natural disaster.
As the trees and the wind started crashing down around us, my wife was, of course, very diligently praying, Lord, please be with us.
Very simply, we do it because God commands us to love others.
I see these volunteers all as a gift from God.
And I'm just grateful they're here, helping out. It's a blessing.
If you're interested in becoming a part of what God's doing through 8 Days of Hope, please go to 8daysofhope.com, click on Get Involved, submit your email address.
I've noticed that whenever there's a time in my life when things might be a little gloomy, the number one thing that I can do is to go serve somebody.
And I would encourage anyone else to, it's worth it. Come out and do it next time if you didn't make it to this one, and the Father will really bless you in it.
Thank you so much for your prayers and volunteering with 8 Days of Hope.
Donald Trump's America.
In under a week, an FBI background check should be completed into allegations of sex assault against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Even as the president praised Christine Blasey Ford for coming forward, GOP Judiciary Committee member Senator Lindsey Graham on ABC's This Week said he won't let the Democrats derail their nominee.
When it comes to judicial nominees nominated by our side, I'm going to make sure they're treated fairly, and he was not.
But committee Democrat Senator Mazie Hirono, also on ABC, says there seems to be no disagreement that Blasey Ford's testimony was genuine.
Everyone acknowledges, including Judge Kavanaugh, that Dr. Ford is not being politically motivated.
The president ordered the FBI probe, although limited in time and scope. It has put on the back burner other issues, including a meeting with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, alleged to be involved in a scheme to prompt the president's removal from office. Rosenstein denies it. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the program. You can go to StaceyOnTheRight.com. You can also go to AFR.net and UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so excited to welcome back for a second visit to the show to talk about this new fantastic, it's exactly a promise that the president made and now has kept. It's Eric Trump. He's the executive vice president of the Trump Organization. He's husband to Laura Lee Trump and large advocate of St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. He is also a believer in Make America Great Again, which I am too. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today.
Stacey, it's so great to be back. Love being with you.
Well, I'm excited because I watched the press conference this morning, and the president was, I thought he looked pretty exuberant about closing this deal. And it was, everybody said he couldn't do it. Media said it. There were some elected officials who said he couldn't do it. There were Congress critters who said he couldn't do it. Anywhere you looked, it was nothing but naysayers about how there was no way he could renegotiate NAFTA, quote unquote. Not only has he done that, but he's renamed it.
It's amazing. We're winning again, Stacey. I mean, we're winning again. America is back, right? Everybody made fun of him when he started talking about trade deals. Well, we must have free trade. He's like, guys, but the problem is we don't have free trade right now. We're getting ripped off at the tune of $800 billion a year. We're rebuilding entire nations. We don't have free trade right now. Everybody calls it free trade, but it's not actually free. And so they poked fun at him, for a long time. And then all of a sudden his message started catching on, and he came up with an amazing deal with Mexico. Then he put a lot of, pressure on Canada. He's obviously going after China in a very big way, and there's a dozen others that are absolutely eating our lunch, or that have been. But you look how good this trade deal with Mexico is. You look how great this trade deal with Canada is. It protects our workers. It stops the abusive practices. We lost, and I think I said this to you last time, Stacey, on the show. Between 2001, Bill Clinton signed NAFTA in 2001. Between 2001 and 2016, we lost 70,000 factories in this country. 70,000. Right? I mean, think about how many jobs. Think about how many families that impacted across, our nation. And so he's going in systematically as a business guy, negotiating harder than anybody in the world would ever negotiate, certainly any politician. He's the only one that actually called out the problem. And he's correcting these trade deals. Guess what? 75% of an American car has to be made here in America, right? I mean, just very basic things like that. And that's going to have our industry return, and it's going to stop, the situations where we let products come into our country for free, but when we send our products made by Americans to other countries, we're not getting taxed unfairly, which puts companies out of business. I was so proud of him today. I was so proud of him. And one other thing that you started with, and I have to say this not to be long-winded, but, no one said he could do this, right? Everybody, they were all naysayers. You can't renegotiate these deals. He gets up there and announced that obviously he reached this unbelievable deal with Canada today. And the press won't even ask questions about it. All they'll ask about is Kavanaugh. So it's so amazing. A couple months ago, they were saying that he couldn't do it, and now he does it, and they don't even want to focus on. And please, can I have one question about fair trade and like free trade and our deal with Canada? But instead, Kavanaugh. I mean, it's really unbelievable. I'm very, very proud of him. He's done an amazing job.
Well, I have to say, one of the things that I find just. I'm with you on the media saying, well, we're going to talk about Kavanaugh, and this is something he promised and was mocked. Like all the shows that are supposed to be quote unquote funny, the nighttime shows said, yeah, he says all the deals are bad and he's going to redo them. Yeah, how's he going to do that? Even President Obama said, how does he bring jobs back here with a magic wand? I mean, it was just a routine matter of course that it was an accepted fact he couldn't do this. Even just one acknowledgement would be enough for me. I don't need a lot, Eric. I'm not that kind of person who needs a ton. Just maybe just one admission that this was something that really it's historic. It's the biggest trade deal we've ever had, and that Canada came to the table at the very last minute under the wire. But I feel like the president knew they were coming. I feel like he expected.
I actually think.
Yeah.
I think you'll better relationship between the two countries because you're no longer in a situation where one country is ripping off the other. And, Mexico's now taken care of, Canada's now taken care of, and believe me, he's focusing on China, right? There's $250 billion worth of tariffs on China right now. Our economy today, the Dow was up 200 points. At opening, the Dow was up 200 points today, right? Our markets are at all-time record highs. You know this better than anybody. If you look at China's stock market is down 20% this year. Their currency is down 12 or 13% this year alone. It's the largest it's the largest drop of any market worldwide for an established country, for a developed country. So everybody talks about these trade wars. They love that word, the trade wars. Well, there's only one trade war, and we were the ones getting absolutely ripped off. But who's winning a trade war if our markets, our economy has never been stronger? And China is down by over 20%. I mean, their economy is totally suffering because, they're a producing nation, we're a consuming nation. They quite frankly need us a lot more than we need them. And Stacey, this year we have 4.2% GDP growth, one of the best in history. We have the lowest unemployment in the history of our nation, 3.9%. I mean, the amount of jobs out there, wages are increasing. This year is 3%, but I mean they're flying up. Manufacturing is coming back. 401ks are up by 35% since election day. I mean, I can go on and on and on. The largest tax cuts in the history of our country. ISIS is all but gone. They're taking on these sanctuary cities that are crippling this country and causing all sorts of problems. They're taking on the opioid crisis, prison reform. I mean, we've gotten great Supreme Court justices in there. We're winning. America's winning again. And the Democrats, and you and I have joked about this before, but they have no message. I mean, what they're trying to run on is let's double taxes, which will tank our economy. I mean, everything that you've seen us pick up would disappear in a second if they were to do that. They're anti-law enforcement, which makes no sense to me. They're anti-plastic straw, because that really is one of the pivotal issues of our time. And, and they want to manufacture chaos at every turn. And it's not going to win these midterms. People have to go out and vote, but it's not going to win these midterms.
Well, so you made so many excellent points there, and I encourage people to go to afr.net. You can pull the podcast down and share that soundbite from Eric Trump to your friends who are wondering, well, what's all the hubbub? The hubbub is what you're not hearing about. Most Americans, unless they're watching CNBC or some other, business-oriented channel, are not going to know that the stock market in China has taken a huge dive, or that they've already announced they're going to reduce some of the tariffs that they increased on us, because it's not hurting us, it's hurting them. The backlash that they're receiving is economic and it's swift, but it has no impact on our market. So when you were here last, it's so funny that this is you're like a boomerang. You're back at just the right spot. This is the conversation we had. We'd had an economic analyst on. She said wages were stagnant and that everything would be back to normal, 2.1% growth by this time next year or earlier. Now here we are. The economy is even stronger than it was the last time you were on, and wages are on the uptick. This is a result of the good economic policies, wouldn't you say?
There's no question. First of all, tell that analyst never bet against Trump because he'll beat you every single time. Don't bet against the man. I've learned that the good and bad way, being a son, and the amount of little wagers. But don't bet against Trump. He's an amazing guy. Second of all, the man has tremendous backbone, and he will fight harder than anybody. You got to realize the politicians in Washington, they were never willing to fight this. They were never. The American president was never willing to take on China before, and Mexico, and Canada, and the media, and the opposite party, and so many others all at the same time. He's an amazing guy. He's willing to take on these fights because he's principled and he knows he's right. When you have an $870 billion trade imbalance with the rest of the world, think about that. We've rebuilt so many countries around the world using our money, our people's money, when it could have gone into our educational system, it could have gone into our schools, it could have gone into our roads, our infrastructure. Instead, we rebuilt China. You see these cities. You have another city that pops up every 3 days over there. Who's building that? That's our roughly $500 billion trade deficit with China, and that's all being pumped into those places. Yet you drive across country and we have bridges that were falling over, right? And it had to change, and it's something that bothered him tremendously. But the politicians never had the guts to take this on, and he does, and that's why we're back on track. From every quantifiable measure, and it's driving the Democrats crazy, it's driving the media crazy. But we're winning again. This country is winning again. We're building the greatest military this country has ever seen. We're taking care of vets. Our economy is absolutely on fire. We're doing so well. Look at ISIS. I don't mean to kind of rant on this, but when he took over office, they estimated that there's 45,000 ISIS fighters. Now they estimate that there's less than 1,000. They took the handcuffs off the military and let them do what they do best, which is kill these bastards. And they've done a great job with it. And, again, no one talks about ISIS. When was the last time you heard, CNN talk about ISIS and the fact that they're all but done?
Well, Eric, CNN, wow, that's kind of a low bar. I don't hear any of them talking about it. But I think the thing so any of these subjects that you've named off, and I think we're on the same page here, any of the subjects you see President Trump not just fighting, but really scrapping for us, because it's not easy for him to go to the G20 summit or the United Nations and, kind of go in there and know that they're really rooting for him to fail, and they don't want to hear him talk tough about trade or about our relationships with these countries in the Middle East that are against our ally Israel. They don't want that. But he goes in and does it anyway because he really cares about this country, and it's the same thing he's been talking about decade after decade ever since he first entered public life as a business person. So I'm excited about it, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. If you're just tuning in, you just missed a fantastic interview with Eric Trump. I'm excited to see him do more. What can we expect? Give us a little teaser. What's next on the agenda? I know we have the midterms, obviously, but there's things that the president is working on for more winning for the American people.
Yeah, kind of. I almost chuckle because you wait over the next 2 and I'll say 6 years, what gets done. What he's accomplished in the last 24 months is nothing short of. He turned around a country. He turned around an entire economy. He deregulated an entire economy, so we have a chance of competing against the rest of the world. Again, you have companies, rushing back to get back to the United States. we have a GDP that's unlike anything we've ever seen before. We've got unemployment unlike anything that we've ever seen before. I mean, he's done so many things, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more trade deals, and he's going to go one by one, and he's going to knock out every single country, and he's going to create fair trade. Otherwise, we'll just stop dealing with them, or we'll put massive tariffs on them like he did with China. And, quite frankly, if you put a 25% tariff on China, you have billions and billions and billions of dollars that are just showing up at the mailbox to the Treasury every month. By the way, that's not the worst thing in the world, Stacey. By the way, if that's our worst case position, having billions of dollars showing up at the U.S. Treasury from China, that's not a bad fallback position. In all fairness, but I kind of do too. But so he's going to continue with trade deals, and there's a lot of other countries. But you know what? I think as each one of these countries comes off, I think as Mexico reaches a deal, and Canada reaches a deal, and China eventually reaches a deal, and so many of these other countries, I think there's a lot of other powers that are saying, you know what, let's not play around. Let's not play with this guy. This guy isn't playing, and he's a very principled person, and, we get too cute, and we're going to hear about it, and it's going to hurt us. And, so I think indirectly as well, he's setting a great example where people are going to be very, very careful the way they treat the U.S. Even look at the United Nations last week. And his general stance to the United Nations. We're funding this entire thing. We're paying for so much of your security, and then you'll come vote against us. You'll be mean to us. You'll be disrespectful. You'll mock us. You'll make fun of us. Guess what? If you're going to do that, we're not paying for it. We're going to make your foreign aid disappear, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to hold you accountable. And again, they've never heard that message from an American president before. And this is our taxpayer money at work. I mean, it can either be going to these countries, or it can be going to our schools, or it can be going to projects domestically. If people have heard that message, and I can tell you we're respected around the world again. We are respected around the world again. We're respected as a country again. And over the next, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, you watch how well we do. This guy, he knows how to win. He fights harder than any person I've ever met in my life, and it's exactly what this country has needed for a very, very, very long time.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. That's my unqualified opinion, is that I'm not only excited about it, I'm looking forward to it. And I come to expect, I keep lifting my bar, and he keeps exceeding it on what he can do with the economy. And it's important for us as a nation to have this economic stability. And I'm just so excited about it. Thank you so much for coming on today to explain the New Deal and talk to us about the president's plans and everything that's going on. It's such a pleasure to speak with you again, Eric Trump. Thank you for your time today, sir.
Thanks, Stacey. It's always great to be on with you. I love the show, and you're amazing. We appreciate everything.
Oh, thank you. We'll talk again soon.
Can't wait.
All right. So, you know what, guys? That was a fantastic interview. I encourage you to go over to afr.net and download the podcast. You can also just share it. You can hit one of the buttons and push it out on your social media. I always love to get Eric Trump's perspective on these, especially these kind of big announcements that have to do with the business world, because he's running the Trump company and group of companies. And so he's really, all of these things, he sees their impact directly, immediately within his sphere of influence, working in that business. So it was great to speak with him. If you're leaving us, see you later from the Heartland. If you're sticking around, we have news and information for you coming up next from onenewsnow.com. God bless.
Family Talk.
AFA Action Alerts. When you subscribe, we'll notify you once or twice a week about a critical issue facing our country. AFA Action Alerts have been very successful in influencing legislation, as well as getting positive results from America's Fortune 500 companies. Subscribe to your AFA Action Alerts today. Go to afa.net and click on the Resources tab.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. Republican Senator Jeff Flake is stoking new speculation about a possible presidential run as he emerges as a central figure in the explosive debate over President Donald Trump's Supreme Court pick. Flake was scheduled to speak in New Hampshire this evening, his second appearance this year in the state that hosts the nation's first presidential primary election. Last week, Flake single-handedly delayed Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation proceedings by insisting on an FBI investigation. President Trump says he's kept one of his big campaign promises. Fox's John Decker has more from the White House.
President Trump touted the new free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, saying it would support hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs and help prop up America's manufacturing industry.
It's going to be a manufacturing powerhouse and allow us to reclaim a supply chain that has been offshored to the world because of unfair trade issues.
The deal, which still needs to be approved by Congress, largely spares Canada and Mexico from the prospect of U.S. tariffs on their vehicles, although it would make it harder for global automakers to build cars cheaply in Mexico. Canada also pledged to curb protection for its dairy industry, a policy the president says unfairly restricts American exports. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
To the surprise and relief of pro-life advocates, the California bill that would have mandated colleges and universities offer abortion pills to students was vetoed by the Democratic governor because it's unnecessary. Bob Kellogg explains.
In his veto statement, Governor Jerry Brown said abortions are a long protected right in California, and most abortion providers are within a reasonable distance from campus communities. Matt Lamb of Students for Life of America believes liability issues schools could incur may have also been a factor.
I think his statement was a good political statement for him, and whether or not that was the only reason, I'll leave that up to the political consultants and experts to parse.
Lamb says the bill's sponsor, Senator Connie Leyva, revealed her very callous attitude toward healthcare workers opposed to abortion.
Someone asked her, what are you going to do about health center workers that don't want to hand out RU-46 because they're pro-life or they don't feel comfortable handing it out? And she said, well, they can just go find a job somewhere else.
Fox News reports, despite the veto, Leyva is promising to reintroduce the bill in the next session. I'm Bob Kellogg.
In world news this hour, residents of an Indonesian city severely damaged by a strong earthquake scrambled to help save those trapped in a sea of mud and debris when houses collapsed. One man described how he rescued neighbors but was unable to save his father and sister, who were buried in the mud, still in a final embrace. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard launched a series of missiles into eastern Syria today in response to a parade attack last month that killed at least 24 people in southern Iran. Fox's Trey Yingst has more from Jerusalem.
According to Iranian state TV, many militants were wounded and killed in the Syrian town of Hajin. Hajin is one of the last places in Syria being held by ISIS fighters. Also shown on state TV was a missile inscribed with death to America, death to Israel, death to Assad, despite the fact that ISIS claimed responsibility for the parade massacre. Following the shooting in late September, Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, was quick to blame the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, pledging a strong response against those countries. Although threats from the Iranian regime continue against the United States, President Trump indicated earlier this year that he'd be willing to meet with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani with no preconditions. In Jerusalem, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
And the Christian Broadcasting Network is entering the world of 24-hour news broadcasting. Chief Executive Officer Gordon Robertson says the channel will air on local television stations in 15 U.S. cities. That is American Family News for this hour. For more news and information, visit onenewsnow.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and the One News Now mobile app for Apple and Android devices.
Y'all have encouraged us to go out, stand for the Word of God, stand politically.
It's truly a blessing to hear how God is using Urban Family Talk.
Just want to say I love everything that Urban Family does.
Will you take a moment to share your story? Call 877-327-5647. That's 877-327-5647. Thanks.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. I am absolutely happy to be here, just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on a Monday. Yeah, I've been very encouraged over the weekend. We went to church. The older daughter came home, and she brought a friend who lives nearby, and so they kind of came home together. And it was so wonderful to see both of them. You know how those college students are so bright-eyed, and they're so energetic, and they're so hungry, like for food. You know, they're just always eating. It was so great. So, you know, they give you energy, these young people. People used to say that when I was younger, and I was like, what are you talking about? Now I get it. I totally get it. Because older people, like myself, and I mean anybody older than 30, I'll just go there, you feel tired. You feel exhausted. And then the children come, and you're like, yes. So it was great. Let's go to the phones. We have Jill in Kentucky. Thank you so much for holding over. It's really a pleasure to speak with you, and happy Monday. Uh-oh. Did we lose call screen?
I was just wondering with this FBI investigation with Kavanaugh, seems like one aspect would be if they really wanted to know the truth, seems like they would look into her finances, any recent deposits or hidden accounts or whatever, because I'm smelling the stench of Democratic money. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for calling. And you're dead on. What I am happy about, I have to say, is that Chuck Grassley, who I was looking askance when these hearings first began in the very beginning, he has actually launched a part of the FBI investigation is going into Dianne Feinstein's role in the leak. In other words, who leaked it? Who leaked the confidential letter? Because as they have pointed out time and time again, in fact, we'll listen to a little bit of audio from Tom Cotton about how the Democrats disgraced the U.S. Senate. They have actually taken this to a whole nother level. I mean, if someone says they want to confidentially bring forward something and they bring it forward and they say, you know, whatever the case may be, whatever happened to you, we can't find enough evidence here to substantiate your claim, then she is prevented from having to undergo the scrutiny that's happened to her. And he is not forced to. Let's forget about Judge Kavanaugh. His wife and kids don't have to undergo what they've had to undergo because of the allegation. Because had it been kept confidential, it would have been handled during the investigation process, and he would have been able to say, I passed 7 FBI investigations instead of 6, because at the end of this, he will have been investigated by the FBI 7 separate times. He could have said, I've had 7 background, investigations done, and they've turned up nothing, or they turned up this or that, but it wasn't enough preponderance of evidence-wise to do anything. And so it's just so interesting that at this point, that's where we are. That instead of it being confidential, instead of it being handled by the FBI originally, because had they brought this through the proper channels and shown the letter to Chairman Grassley when they received it, then it would have received not only the full FBI investigation with no time limit, but it would have remained confidential and would have only been a matter of something to disqualify him. Then it would have become somewhat public, but it still wouldn't have been to the degree that it is now. But the Democrats needed this. They needed a public recitation of what supposedly happened to her. And I just can't tell you how many people I know who have educational backgrounds similar to this woman. It is a rarefied space that she occupies with 2 master's degrees and a PhD, but it's not so rarefied that I don't know. I know I have like 7 of my friends have PhDs, and these are real people that I know, not Facebook friends, real people that I know. I've never seen a woman with an advanced education such as hers behave the way she did. I've never seen a woman with that kind of education kind of make herself small in front of other people and talk with a baby voice. Never seen it. I've never seen anyone I know who's an adult who wears glasses come out with glasses that look like they were smeared with Vaseline in public. the hair, all over the head. Looked like she had just muffed it up herself. Like, literally just muffed it. Muffing is where you just take your hands and you just go up and up and up until the hair just looks kind of matted underneath. I just have never seen that before. And so I know that's not normal. The normal presentation of a woman with an education like that is usually razor sharp, or if they're in the medical field, it's very clean. The presentation is very, very, it's almost like it's muted so that the person's beauty or hairdo or makeup don't detract from their expertise. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this before. Just observe. The next time you take your child to the pediatrician, notice what the pediatrician, the reason you haven't noticed is because most pediatricians, male and female, they wear their clothing in such a way that they just don't draw attention to their physical attributes. Even when they're attractive, they don't play it up, because what they're doing is they want you to see them as the expert that they are. They want you to respect their education, the time they've spent in residency. All of that background to them is far more important than cutting a sharp figure to you or looking like they have on the latest clothing. And that's why you don't usually remember what they wear. They have on a white lab coat, but underneath it's not Versace. It's not, they're wearing nice clothes, but they're not anything that you're going to be like, oh my goodness, I remember that skirt she had on. You're probably not. Now, it's a little different with dermatologists, but before I go off on a total tangent, there's a reason why people, especially women in professional business atmosphere and professions, if you will, they don't cut a particularly sharp figure at work. Now, you catch them out in the evening, going to a cocktail party or something like that, and they'll dazzle you. But at work, they're muting all of that because it's their expertise that matters. They don't want you to remember that they were wearing a certain kind of makeup or their hair was in. They want you to remember the advice they gave to you, that you need to do X, Y, and Z, and also the prescription you need to pick up and be back here in 4 weeks. That's what they're interested in you remembering. So she didn't have on much makeup to speak of, but there was something about her demeanor that was almost like she just escaped some kind of psychiatric facility and she just barely got out with her glasses. That whole thing. I watched one of those body language expert videos, and it was pretty interesting to see how that all, like the body language expert was taking her to task pretty roughly, but she made some good points about she didn't present herself like someone who had an advanced education. And that really rang true with me. I'd already said that, and then to hear someone else say it who I don't know, it was kind of helpful. So what I'm going to do now is, since we're on the topic of Kavanaugh, let's stay with it. We'll listen to number one. It's Cotton. So it's Tom Cotton. He's talking about the Democrats disgracing the U.S. Senate in this orchestrated smear campaign against Kavanaugh. And it says it's an important bit of audio because he sets the record straight here. It's number one.
There is a well-established process of confidentiality on the committee. Dianne Feinstein could have showed that letter to Chuck Grassley, and the two of them, as the leaders of that committee, could have shared it with the FBI, who could have discreetly conducted this inquiry in July and in August without betraying Ms. Ford's confidences. And they have betrayed her. They pointed her to lawyers, lied to her, and did not tell her that the committee staff was willing to go to California to interview her. All that's water under the bridge. Those lawyers are going to have to face a D.C. bar investigation into their misconduct. Dianne Feinstein and her staff is going to face an investigation for why they leaked that. All this could have been done discreetly. It happens hundreds of times every year in the Judiciary Committee. I found him to be appropriately indignant at the smear campaign, and I'm disappointed in what Chris Coons said on that video leading in. It reminds me of the old verb. This animal is very wicked. It defends itself when attacked. Yeah. If they didn't want him to come in and be angry and indignant at their false accusations, they should have thought about that before they accused him of being a serial sex criminal for the last 2 weeks. Let me ask you this.
And do you see what he said? He said, this animal is very wicked. It defends itself when it's attacked. That is a hallmark of what we've seen lately from the Democrats. I thought, let's just cast our minds back to before Judge Kavanaugh actually took the stand. I'd seen him on Martha McCallum's show, and he was so meek and so mild, and it was so embarrassing for him discussing, how he was a virgin and all of that. I thought to myself, oh, if he really does get a chance to testify, he's going to be very different. But I forgot that old thing about attorneys. And we know a few attorneys too. An attorney is interesting because when they're with you, like a regular person, their natural personality can be very, very mild, very laid back, very, very unassuming almost. But then put them in a courtroom with a set of facts that they have to lay out, and it's like you flipped a switch, and now they're like a lion coming at you, and they're hitting all of the points, and they're aggressively making the points. It's a totally different thing. And that's what we saw with Judge Kavanaugh. He was righteously indignant, and that anger had been pent up and stored up for a bit, and he was just letting it go. And it was right. It was appropriate. And so people who are saying, wow, he's probably an angry drunk, here's what we're ignoring about that. And I need to make this point because it strains the outer reaches of what we know about drunk people. So first of all, there is such a thing as an angry drunk, right? But there's also, they're accusing him of being an angry drunk and also a drunk who drinks to the point of blacking out. Now, if you're getting close to blacking out, if you're drinking, what are some of the hallmarks of someone who's getting ready to black out? Well, a person who's drinking to the point of blacking out, because that's being unconscious, which means you're literally a few steps away from alcohol poisoning. So you're so drunk, you're close to blacking out. That means your words are slurred and you're literally like walking limp Puttyville. You don't have any bones that are like going in a straight line. Everything is mush. You're falling over yourself. You can't get up. You can't walk more than 2 or 3 steps without stumbling and falling. How does a guy who's constantly blacking out carry out the attack that she described in the room? How does he do that? He's so drunk, he's almost blacked out, but he's also able to manipulate her, hold her down, exert force upon her. This stuff just doesn't fly. If you look at what's being said here and you add it all up, take it all together, it doesn't work. She's afraid of flying, but she flies on vacation. She flies for her hobbies. She flies for work. She flies all the time. She didn't know they'd offered for a personal interview to happen in California, but if she had known, she would have been willing to host them, et cetera, et cetera. She didn't know what kind of attorney to hire. She didn't know that anything about hiring attorneys. Dianne Feinstein recommended some attorneys to her. She hired them. They recommended a lie detector test. She doesn't know if there was any recording equipment in the room. She was in a conference room at a hotel. She doesn't know how she got to the party. She's unsure of how many people were there, but surely there were only 4 plus herself, or 4 plus herself and her friend. And then she doesn't know how she got home. She says she said hi to Mark Judge, a man who watched another man hold her down and sexually assault her. She went in a door that was close enough to him to say hello, and he was embarrassed. Wouldn't she have turned back around and left? Why would she say hi to a man who helped facilitate a sexual assault against her that traumatized her to the degree that she was upset? And then there's her undergraduate degree at Chapel Hill. Back when she attended Chapel Hill and applied, it was a very difficult school to get into. She said this derailed her entire high school career, but she still managed to get into one of the toughest schools in the country. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but in the end, there's what is this? It's a hit job. It's a political hit job by people who are still angry over the result from 2 years ago when the president won the election. They're angry that he's already gotten to appoint 1 judge. They're definitely angry that he's attempting to appoint another judge, and they want to put a stop to it. And this is how they plan to get it done. It's not about the truth. It's not about fairness. It's not about believing women. It's not even about sexual assault victims. But it is sad. It definitely is sad. All right, when we get back, we have more for you. We'll take your calls as well, 866-963-2037. Be right back.
Still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's MediShare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. MediShare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to MediShare.
Call ** 345 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. MediShare. Call ** 345. Message and data rates may apply. That's ** 345.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Just over a week ago, Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban went into a Los Angeles studio to try to explain why he wasn't aware of sexual harassment in the corporate offices of the Mavericks. The press conference to address the ruling by the NBA was in Dallas, but Mark Cuban, who was taping Shark Tank, stayed in L.A. to appear on an ESPN program. The fact that he couldn't make it to Dallas for the press conference should tell you something. His explanation on the ESPN program was that he should have done due diligence about who was running the corporate office. That would be someone who had already been under investigation for sexual harassment. Various sports writers even wrote about it. When the Mavericks HR director recommended one of the individuals be fired, Cuban took a pass. It is worth remembering that Mark Cuban is often presented on Shark Tank as a hands-on boss and expert on entrepreneurship. Of course, Mark Cuban isn't alone. He joins a list of coaches like Urban Meyer at Ohio State and Joe Paterno at Penn State who didn't see or didn't act when sexual abuse or sexual harassment were taking place. What happened in the Mavericks corporate office could apparently also be found in colleges like Baylor and Michigan State. My point is it's not a small, isolated problem. Why is this happening? Well, the perpetrators have a power advantage over their employees, players, or family members. It is not only a problem in sports, but in entertainment and politics, as illustrated by the women who have come forward in the #MeToo movement. It's also happening because men in leadership in the sports programs I just mentioned didn't see it because they weren't looking for it. The solution is to change the sports culture and call for more scrutiny and accountability. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I actually think it's a good thing for Judge Kavanaugh. I think it's actually a good thing. Not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. Now, with that being said, I'd like it to go quickly. And the reason I'd like it to go quickly, very simple. It's so simple. Because it's unfair to him at this point. What his wife is going through, what his beautiful children are going through, is not describable. It's not describable. It's not fair. I think it's fair to do it to me because, you know, I've been going from day one. I've been from long before I got to office. You've been doing it. It's almost became, I think for me, it's like a part of my job description to handle this. But as far as this is a man that this is not from his world. And you know what? If they're not going to want him, and I think that would be a shame, I'm with him all the way. I mean, a charge made or said to have occurred 36 years ago, and nothing happened since. And look, I feel badly for all parties. I feel badly for everybody. I feel badly for our country. This is so bad for our country. But I will tell you, I watched those senators on the Democrat side, and I thought it was a disgrace, and partially because I know them. I know them too well. And you know what? They are not angels.
Are you saying your White House has... All right, welcome back to the show. That was the president. He was actually talking about the new trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States when the Kavanaugh topic was broached yet again. And he, towards the end of the press conference, was doing some, answering of questions on that subject. And you know, he didn't have to do that, but it was good of him to talk about that. And he really has apparently a comfort level with it, because I think he sincerely believes that Judge Kavanaugh is innocent and that the FBI investigation is going to exonerate him. And of course, you know, remains to be seen what comes of it. Obviously, you have to wait until the FBI is done with what they have to do. But so far, based on what's been shared, it just doesn't look very likely that it's going to go any differently. Let's go to the phones. We'll take a call. Connie in Tennessee. Thanks for calling the show.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, yes. This is Connie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Because I'm in my car.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you taking my call. I heard you talking Friday because I listened to you on my way to get my grandson. I try to get both sides of the story, yours and the way I feel. Your opinion is different from mine, but that's fine. But I noticed you said really ugly things about Dr. Ford, the way she looks. And I don't understand what that has to do with anything. What her hair or glasses have to do with, is she telling the truth or is he? My question is, did they know each other? And are they going to question those friends or so-called people that were there and see? That would tell us a lot, don't you think?
Well, they are. They're talking to Mark Judge. They're talking to the one whose nickname is PJ. They're talking to everyone who she says was there. That's the first thing. So, yes, the answer to your question is yes, they're going to talk to them. And I didn't make a comment about whether or not she was pretty. I talked about her state of appearance at the hearing. And I spoke about that because when we're looking at her appearing before a Senate Judiciary panel, an appearance she prepared for over 2 weeks, I think it really makes a difference how she chooses to appear. And it looked like an act that she was putting on. And so that's why I made the comments that I made. They're observations based on how she looked. Did you listen to the hearing or did you watch it?
I watched all of it. And so, but her voice, see, I've never met her. I've never met any of these people. I've never met Donald Trump. I think he looks, if we're going to talk somebody's hair, no, come on. But that's fine. That's neither here nor there. We can't get past that. He's president.
Yeah, well, he's had that same hair for 25, 30 years. So that's the hairstyle he's had the entire time.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Sure. I mean, it's not something that impacts his performance. The hair doesn't impact his performance. And what I'm talking about is her presentation to the committee, which looked to me like, Connie, that she put that presentation on for a specific purpose, which was to make the committee have a certain thought pattern about her, to receive what she was saying in a certain way. You didn't find her voice to be kind of like ridiculous for a woman in her 50s who teaches graduate school?
Right, that's what I was going to ask you, but you beat me to it. I was going to say, do you know that her voice doesn't sound like that?
No, I don't.
I have a deep voice. I get confused. People say may to me sometimes. I don't know why. I don't think my voice is that deep, but I don't know. Maybe her voice sounds like that. But if she's lying, couldn't she get in trouble? I'm trying to hear both sides. He acted like a complete crazy person, and if he's got all that experience, he knew what he was coming for. He should have been able to control himself better.
Well, okay. Now let's talk about that, Connie, because that's an interesting point that you're making. You don't think that if he'd showed up and kind of presented a meek presentation and was really, really calm, that everyone would have said, especially media types on CNN and MSNBC, they would have said, you know what, he doesn't really believe that he's innocent. He can't even defend himself. I mean, he was caught by the neck if he did, caught by the neck if he didn't. I thought his presentation was indignant and he was upset, and it was because he's been wrongly accused.
And he shouldn't have brought his 10-year-old daughter into it. I thought that could have been left out. The child really shouldn't be talking about any of this, in my opinion, because this is an adult matter.
But Connie,
and he brought it up in front of the nation and started crying.
Well, but do you think that?
But anyway,
do you think that he did that because his daughter's already been drug into it? Have you seen the media coverage of his family, the cartoons about his daughters, the letters that his wife has gotten, the death threats? Have you seen all of that?
I have. I've seen it on both sides, and I think this whole thing is, you're right, it's ridiculous. They're right. The senators are right. I thought Lindsey Graham acted awful. There's a certain way someone in that position should act. all of them.
I thought Lindsey Graham
acted that way. Yeah.
Connie, I have to say that people thought it was so awesome when Cory Booker had his quote unquote Spartacus moment, and I thought that was kind of grandstanding and ridiculous. I understood where he was going with it, but I didn't agree with what he was saying. I thought Lindsey Graham looked justifiably ticked off because the process was ruined by the way that the allegation was brought forward, and he was indignant and upset. And I just think, when Barack Obama got upset and cried, he was a gentleman and he had feelings. And when Barack Obama dropped the mic and went on the shows and read mean tweets and did all this stuff that I thought was unpresidential, everyone on the left said, oh, look how cool he is. Look how relatable he is. So could it be that the reason why you don't think Lindsey Graham or Kavanaugh were correct is because you are on the opposite side of the aisle, and so you're kind of predisposed to disagree with what they're saying?
I think that the nice one, the only one that was really trying to be nice, and then I think you said it Friday, well, he shouldn't have talked to the Democrats because that messed everything up. And that's what they're supposed to do? I'm not any of it. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. That's why everything needs to change. They need to get some people up there that can be fair on both sides, including Kavanaugh. I don't keep talking about the Democrats. I just don't think any of it is fair. And when you're sitting, like me, a grandmother, sitting back here with 5 grandsons that are going to go out into the world someday, and you want this to be a good world for them, this isn't right. But a lot does need to change, and that is one thing I agree with. It doesn't seem to be changing for the better at this moment.
Well, so, Connie, talking about your grandsons, would you be okay with your grandsons being accused and having their lives ruined over an accusation that's unsupported? Just basically one word from a woman, she has to be believed, so your grandson has to lose his career, lose everything that he's worked so hard for? I mean, I think that with, you say 5 grandsons, you have a lot of skin in the game here. You have a lot to lose.
You're right.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to drink. And everybody keeps saying, oh, did he drink? Oh, was he drunk? I don't care. I don't care if he did that. I really don't. I want to know if they knew each other. He said they never saw each other, and she said they did. That's what I want to know. And the media wants to keep talking about the drinking. I could care less what the guy drank or drinks,
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
It was nice when he.
Yeah,
but
I agree with you.
Did you think it was nice? She said, "Do you drink it?" He yelled at that woman. I can't remember her name.
Oh,
I did watch the whole thing. He said, "Did you drink?" That wasn't nice.
No, it wasn't. But he apologized to her afterwards for that. I think that was just his frustration at the questioning, and it's an extraordinary amount of stress that he's been under, and so that was the one out of the entire 30 some odd. I think he's done like 40 hours of testimony now. The one area where he made a mistake was when he said, "Have you?" And so I'm willing to give him a pass on that once, out of 40 hours of really intense testimony with protesters and all of that. But I don't know. I agree with you. I don't care about the drink, Connie. I agree with you, that things need to change. But I do think, and it's probably the same for me, I'll admit it, Connie, it's probably the same for me. But I tend to view this politically because it is in the political realm. And I do distrust the Democrats a great deal based on their behavior thus far. And I tend to not believe Dr. Ford because of the way that she went about bringing forward her allegation and then her presentation at the testimony. And, I've been praying about it. I've been praying for the Kavanaughs. I've also prayed for Dr. Ford and her family. And I hope that there will be a resolution to this that can kind of calm things down. But I'm not sure that that's what the Democrats want. Do you think
I appreciate it because you could have hung up on me, but my husband voted for Trump. I voted for Clinton. I got no problem. We're still married. That's not going to affect. These are our opinions. But I just really am so tired of this and that. I'm just sick of it, and it almost makes you not vote. That's why my daughter, she said, if you put that out, I'm going to block you off my Facebook. I'm trying to make a point. She won't vote. She's a nurse. Anyway, that's my life.
Well, I can understand why she wouldn't want to be involved in it, especially if she's a nurse. Nurses are some of my favorite people because I've had surgery before, and there's nothing a nurse won't do for you. Stuff your parents won't even do, nurses will do for you. So If she's got nursing to do, maybe we just give her a pass and, maybe she could just stay out of it.
You got the right to complain if you don't vote.
Well, it's true.
Well,
That's how I
know.
feel, but I'm hesitant to criticize her because of what she does for a living. So,
well,
Connie, thank you for calling. And, I wouldn't hang up on you. I'm understanding where you're coming from, but I just don't trust that woman. And so I could be wrong. I've already said that a few times. I could be wrong. We'll see what happens after the FBI investigation. Thank you for calling into the show. I appreciate your
Let's do 50-50. Let's just meet it. Let's do 50-50. It could be him. It could be her. That's the way I'm viewing it. I don't know.
Could be.
She could be lying. He could be lying. That's my honest.
Anything's possible.
I believed her. But, I start listening and all these people tell me other stuff. Well, she's taking a risk. If she's lying, then she should, in my opinion, go to jail. I'm not saying she is. I believe her, but I don't know because they're playing on the drunk thing so much. We'll probably never know the real truth. But I would like to know if they knew each other. That's my main point that I called you about. So thank you, and have a good day.
All right, thanks, Connie. Thanks for calling the show. I'd like to know that too. To be honest, I'd love to know if they knew each other. So far, the 4 people they've spoken to have said that they don't remember Judge Kavanaugh knowing Dr. Ford. That's what's so far. Now, the FBI is still investigating, so we'll see, right? We'll see what they come up with. But so far, there's no connection between Judge Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford, as in friendship, some proof, some friend who said, oh, yeah, I knew both of them. They were friends or they were whatever. And she was 2 years older than him, but that doesn't mean anything because you know how it is with kids. If you have any teenagers, you know that sometimes the friends cross-pollinate because of siblings. If you have siblings, your siblings' friends can be your friends. If you're somewhat close to each other within a couple of years, y'all can go to the movies together and stuff like that. So you can know someone who's 2 years older or 2 years younger. It can happen. Okay, we have time for one more quick call. Susie in Illinois. Hey, Susie, thanks for calling. You have about a minute or so. What's your comment?
Okay. What I would like to say is I believe they do know each other. They probably didn't hang around with each other in the same crowd or anything like that. However, she was at the party, that he was at the party. They have the same friends. She named people, he named people, ran in the same crowd. But I don't believe he should be Supreme Court because of the accusation. He just should not. Just like you guys prosecuted Bill Cosby, and he was a horrible guy because of the accusation. Do the same.
I didn't say that. I'm sorry, Susie. I didn't say that. Don't lump me in with that group. I did not say that about Bill Cosby. Nope.
No. I didn't. You said it. I'm speaking in general and overall. It was a lot of people that crucified Bill Cosby on his situation. Now this has come up about the Supreme Court. It's not in their favor, so now they want to shut it down. Be fair. Hear everything out. If Bill Cosby be crucified, so should the Supreme, soon-to-be or wanna-be Supreme Judge because of the accusation. And
yeah, but the Supreme Court thing is different than Bill Cosby because he was actually prosecuted through, they brought charges against him in criminal and civil court. So they actually did get a chance to present their evidence, and then a jury decided. That's not what's happening with Judge Kavanaugh. So it's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison. Do you think, Susie, that that's the same?
Accuse him of him rape. Is that not such? Wait,
they accused him of what?
Dr. Ford is accusing Kavanaugh of attempt rape. Is that not true?
Sexual assault, yes. She is accusing him of that.
So the accusation itself, even before Bill Cosby was even charged, people was, racing about how horrible a person he was because of the accusation. It's the accusation that's making this a mess.
Okay. Thank you, Susie, for calling, and I appreciate your perspective. I hear the music, and I think I understand what you're pointing out. It's the accusations that are destroying these people. I didn't agree with people saying that Cosby was guilty based on the accusations. I didn't agree with that at all. All right, when we get back, we'll have more. We're going to talk about the voter intensity and illegal immigrants getting deported for cheating the system. Stay right there.
There was a time where I was in the middle of doing something, and the Lord just really impressed upon my heart that I needed to buy my wife some flowers. I hadn't thought about it, hadn't done it in a while. I walk into the door of our little small apartment, and I have the flowers in my hand, and my wife's eyes connect with mine. Her eyes just well up with tears. And I immediately started thinking, what's wrong? What happened? What's going on? And she said, Abe, I've been wanting some flowers, but I know what our financial situation is, and I didn't want to be an additional burden on you because I know things are tight now. And man, it was just a moment where my wife and I just fall more deeply in love with the Lord and more deeply in love with one another.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekday afternoons at 5 Central on Urban Family Talk.
By relying on Him. Oh, God. Oh, Lord, I thank you. I thank you, Lord. I thank you, Lord.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Well, there is good news and bad news. The good news is non-farm payrolls grew by 201,000 in August. A Reuters survey of economists pegged expectations at just 191,000. Average hourly earnings jumped by 2.9%, above the 2.7% increase that was expected. Oh, and the unemployment rate continues to hold near a generational low of 3.9%. Now for the bad news. None of this is supposed to matter to you. Instead, you are encouraged to focus on the president's Twitter feed, even though only 7% of Americans actually use it. We should not bury our heads in the sand. Being informed is important, but how about a bit of balance? There are wonderful economic developments which are a direct result of the Trump administration policies. Listen, the number of Americans filing for unemployment welfare fell to the lowest number in 50 years. More families are experiencing the joy of the fruit of their labor. Let's take some time out and enjoy the good news. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. It was long thought that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wouldn't try to run through a procedural hurdle and start debate on the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to serve on the Supreme Court until the day after the Judiciary Committee sent the paperwork to the floor. In fact, that's the Senate rule. But in the Senate, you can make the sun rise in the west if you can get what's called unanimous consent. In other words, the agreement of all 100 senators. In a strange twist, the Senate actually managed to formally launch debate on the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh a day early, thanks to the Democrats. So on Friday night, before a virtually empty chamber, McConnell asked unanimous consent of the Senate to begin debate on Kavanaugh. No one objected, because no one was there. Democrats didn't put up a fight, because they agreed to McConnell proceeding to the nomination. And in the Senate, if everyone agrees, you can go around the rules and make the sun rise in the west. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
This is Stacey on the Right with Stacey Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
And what I'm finding is prior to the Kavanaugh hearing, the intensity level was really on the Democratic side, that more Democrats were wanting to go vote than Republicans. Republicans thought there was not a need. But in the last week, there's been a fundamental shift that people are now becoming upset, not just how Justice Kavanaugh was treated, but Dr. Ford, that the Democrats knowingly had this letter, held it, and then put her through this. You did not have to do this. And so it's a big frustration. And I was at an event yesterday, and one of the candidates said, I was having a hard time having volunteers come up. Now they're just coming to the headquarters. And I think the intensity level has now increased because of what transformed.
Wow. So welcome back to the program. UrbanFamilyTalk.com, StaceyOnTheRight.com. Head over, hit the subscribe button, hang with us. So we've got this voter intensity, which is an interesting thing because I think it's really up on both sides of the political aisle. And I can understand, like, the two callers we just had recently. We had Connie and, you know, expressing disbelief at Kavanaugh, but it's not really about whether or not we believe them from their presentation. It's about whether or not there's evidence to move forward. And I'm saying that because, again, this is the children, you know, the legacy that we're leaving to the kids that all of us have. My husband and I, we have a son, and I have lots of cousins who are guys, and they have sons. And, you know, so the whole idea that any man is open to this new normal where only an accusation is needed to take you down, That is not the way this thing is supposed to work. And the comparison with Bill Cosby, yes, it was an accusation, but with Bill Cosby, they actually took the steps of filing a case with the last woman. There were a bunch of accusers, but the conviction came from the last woman being within the statute of limitations. And even though it happened a long time ago, she was able to present whatever evidence was required that now has him spending 3 years in jail. This is the way it's supposed to work, actually. I don't agree with 35. First you have 5 accusers, then you have 20 accusers, then you have 35 accusers, but only one of them is made to actually provide evidence. If anyone's going to accuse, they should be made to provide evidence. If you have an evidentiary standard, then that prevents people, or at least deters them, from bringing false charges. In every case that you see where a false charge has been brought and someone's gone to jail mistakenly, it's because prosecutors were like, well, we just have to believe this woman. We don't have a lot of evidence, so we're going to move forward. You better take a plea bargain. So an innocent man goes to jail on a plea bargain because they don't want to go to court and face 40 years. It's an easy win for the prosecutor, who gets a slam dunk and gets to increase their rate of, winning cases. And the accuser gets to get off with only her word being all that's needed to put a man in jail. Imagine if the shoe were on the other foot. Women would be marching by the millions on Washington, D.C. or wherever they needed to march to put a stop to this. Men are just sitting around with their eyebrows up in their forehead, just looking around like, I can't believe this is happening. It's happening. I would compare what's happening to Judge Kavanaugh to what happened to Clarence Thomas, because there were no criminal charges filed in either case. It's not an apples to apples comparison to compare it to Bill Cosby, because there were criminal charges brought and they had to have a preponderance of the evidence in order to meet the standard in order to take it to trial. I hate it because we have all of the DVDs of him on the Cosby Show and our kids love watching those. And so for me, it's a devastating, that he was convicted. It's just, it's just hard to believe that he did that. But obviously he was found guilty in a court of law. So, speaking of, we're talking about day one. Apparently, October 1st is day one of the deportation of illegal immigrant welfare cheats. The Trump administration on Monday began a new effort to target deporting immigrants caught cheating on welfare, lying about their IDs, the ones who've been accused of serious crimes. The new policy is driven by public safety. And Francis Cisna, who's the director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, told Georgetown University Law School at an immigration conference on Monday morning that, quote, what is new is we are expanding the categories of people who are going to be receiving these notices to appear to most principally people who applied for a benefit or have no underlying lawful status. In other words, they're here illegally and they're using our services, draining money from the taxpayers. So USCIS has had the authority to issue the so-called NTAs for 15 years, and they issued 91,000 of them in 2016 and 2017, and the reasons have been limited until the agency expanded them in July. So, quote, Cisna says, starting today, USCIS will begin implementing the updated NTA policy. Under the new guidance, USCIS officers will now issue an NTA for a wider range of cases where the individual is removable and there is evidence of fraud, criminal activity, or an applicant is denied an immigration benefit and is unlawfully present in the country. This is also a result of the executive order issued by President Trump. I couldn't be more behind it, because people who are here illegally take jobs from American citizens who need to be working. And if you're here in the country lawfully and you want to work, but you can't because the plant near you is only hiring illegal immigrants, that's just a bridge too far. You're working, you're paying taxes, you're out of work, you want a job, and you're watching other people who aren't in the country legally, they're taking that job. Come on. We have to have some kind of sympathy for those people. They're Americans like us. We need to take care of them first. So the new justifications for issuing the NTAs are cases where fraud or misrepresentation is substantiated, where an applicant has abused any program related to the receipt of public benefits, criminal cases where an applicant is convicted or charged with a criminal offense or has committed acts that are chargeable as a criminal offense, even if the criminal conduct was not the basis of the denial or the grounds for removability. And they may refer cases involving serious criminal activity to ICE before adjudication of an immigration benefit. And I think that's good news. I think it's good news. So I did talk a little bit about, in the last segment, I talked about, or first segment, that Governor Jerry Brown has signed a bill requiring that California corporate boards have to include women. So Governor Jerry Brown said on Sunday, he actually signed a bill into law on Sunday that makes California the first state to require corporate boards of directors to include women. And so when I was talking the first hour, I was talking about serving on boards. I've never served on a corporate board, a school board as an elected official, and then on some other not-for-profit boards. This is corporate boards. This is actually the state of California telling companies what they have to do. A company that is self-sustaining and pouring tax dollars and jobs and all kinds of benefits into the community, into the state of California, now has to hire women for its board, even if they don't have women qualified that they want to hire. I mean, I think it's totalitarianism. How can you justify supporting that? I'm just wondering, how do you get to a place where you're supporting that? So let's listen to Trey Gowdy. He says, turning to the collusion, because have you noticed how we're not hearing anything about the Mueller investigation or collusion? It's as if it's not happening anymore. It's like magic. It's just gone. Well, Trey Gowdy said they now have 53 transcripts that will show that there's been no collusion. It's number 3.
Well, you're going to see that Tom Rooney and Mike Conaway and I asked collusion, coordination, conspiracy questions of every single witness, from Jared Kushner to Donald Trump Jr. to Steve Bannon to Susan Rice, Samantha Power. I want your viewers and my fellow citizens to see every question that was asked. And what they will learn is Republicans were just as interested in finding out what happened with respect to collusion, coordination, conspiracy as anyone else. And what they'll also learn is that Adam Schiff wanted to go back 25 years and ask questions of witnesses while they were in junior high school. And then he goes and gets the sparkle notes from the brothers Karamazov and decides to ask about Russian, ominous-sounding Russian names that none of the witnesses had ever heard of. So I can't wait for the transcripts to come out and defeat this narrative that Adam Schiff is the only one that is concerned about collusion. You can rest assured this, Maria, if there were evidence of collusion, Adam would have leaked it a long time ago. But there is not, and I can't wait for the transcripts to be public.
Well. There's no evidence of collusion. So, when do we see the end of the investigation? That's my question. We got to get some guests on to talk about this. We got to get some guests lined up for later in the week who can come on and talk to us about next steps. Like, how do we know when this is over? Is it close to being over? Is it almost over? Like, how will we know that it's over? I'm ready. I am ready to move past this. If we thought that the president has been able to do some good things so far, imagine what he'll be able to do when he no longer has an investigation hanging over his head, keeping him from accomplishing other things that he'd like to do. Without the investigation, then there are some Republicans who are currently kind of stonewalling and not working with him congressionally who would be much more open to working with him. Yeah, thanks. I think that's the way we should do it. And I was just thinking about this. To the question that we had earlier today on the show from a caller, it might have been Connie, who was saying, what voice does Dr. Ford have? Is that her real voice? So I'd actually been direct messaging with someone else about that. As a professor, a graduate school professor, so she teaches graduate students and undergrad, she would have somewhere some video of her speaking or presenting. But are you aware, anyone who's listening, who's supporting this idea that she's right, that just before the allegation became public, her entire social media was scrubbed, all of her tweets, her Facebook account. So you know how it is when you go speak at a conference, you usually post a link to the conference and you click through to the link to the conference website and they'll have the different panels and you can watch panels of people speaking about different things. We can't do that with her because her social media has been scrubbed. The articles that she wrote for the abortion manufacturer, the RU486 drug maker, they've been scrubbed. Someone wrote an article about how she'd written those articles and the company scrubbed them off. So I'll just say this, you know, for someone who wants to be believed, for someone who wants everyone to take her at face value, are those the behaviors of someone who has an open and honest record that they just want an opportunity to you know, air their allegation and let the chips fall where they may? Doesn't really seem like it, does it? No, not really. All right, we have time to take one quick call before the close of the show. The fantastic callers today. Happy Monday to everybody. Let's talk to Richard in South Carolina. Hey, Richard, thanks for calling the show today.
Hey, Stacey. This is first time catching you on Periscope.
Oh, hi.
Your show has been absolutely wonderful today. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Oh, what's your comment?
I just wanted to give you a call. Saw earlier that Chris Evans, the actor, has been, and many other on the left have been trashing Kanye for his stance and on SNL on Saturday night. And just wanted to get your opinion on with Candace Owens and all these guys and Black America, you know, standing up for and openly supporting Donald Trump. And here you have, you know, liberal white guy trying to tell Kanye West what to think and what not to say. I just think it's pretty hypocritical.
It is. It is, Richard. It totally is hypocritical. Thank you for bringing it up, first of all, because I actually was going to talk about it, but I couldn't find any clean audio of him making the comments because he said a few things that were pretty interesting about the welfare state, right? He said that the welfare state has taken black dads out of the home and really decimated the black community so that the black community can't keep up socioeconomically with everybody else, right? But then, Richard, he says, stop thinking with your mind, think with your heart. He ordered everyone to disconnect their thinking centers and use their hearts to make decisions, which that's emotional thinking. That's not what we want. I'll put it this way. I think Kanye West is a masterful marketing genius, and I believe he truly is, you know, politically he's in a transformational mode. But and I like Candace Owens. I think she's very sharp. She's a little rough for my taste as far as like she can be pretty hard hitting and she doesn't shy away from the cursing. But I would say I like what she's doing. I like what Turning Point USA is doing and Charlie Kirk. I think they're fantastic. They're plugged into the young people. I don't use Kanye West as an example of conservatism, but he has every right to think and believe whatever he'd like, just like Chris Evans does. And Chris Evans should really sit down and keep acting as Captain America before people realize what he's been saying and stop liking him. That's how I feel about him. I like Chris Evans as an actor. I don't care what he thinks politically because I don't think he has two pennies to rub together worth of an opinion that I'd be interested in hearing about politics. Honestly. What does he read? What does he write? Who does he spend time talking politics with? Anyway, great calls today. Thank you so much. Good night from the Heartland. I'll be back with you tomorrow with more Stacey on the Right. God bless.